Awesome. Thank you all so much for joining and for deciding to round out your day with us. On behalf of the Data Science for Everyone Coalition, welcome to Paths to Data Science Strategies for Your State. While we are waiting for folks to join Zoom and pop over from other calls, we'd like to invite you to introduce yourself in the chat. So please state your name, organization, and why you're interested in joining the event today. Thanks so much, y'all. My name's Zarek Drosted. I'm the Director of Data Science for Everyone. DS4E is a national initiative, coalition, and community based at the University of Chicago, striving to catalyze the adoption of data science and data literacy as a basic component of K-12 education. We began our work under the leadership of economist and Freakonomics co-author Steve Levitt back in 2019. It's since grown to a national movement and coalition with over 2,600 education leaders in many states and districts around the country. We currently work on four main things as displayed in the slide here: raising awareness, gathering and catalyzing classroom resources, community building, and policy as it relates to data science education. I am so excited for today's conversation with education leaders from data science, math, and computer science on how states can find the best data science education implementation model that works best for their needs. In a moment, I will turn this conversation over to Emmanuel Schanzer, a longtime champion of integrated computing education in K-12, who will serve as a moderator for our event today. We're also joined by Kevin Dykema, the president of National Council of Teachers of Mathematics, Lindsey Henderson, the secondary mathematics specialist with the Utah State Board of Education, Eboney McKinney, the director of K-12 mathematics and educational technology for the Arizona Department of Education, and Paige Prescott, the executive director and co-founder of the Computer Science Alliance. Before beginning the event, we would like to remind everyone about the DS4E community standards. We believe everyone belongs in the data future and that healthy debate is productive and beneficial. We welcome coalition members from all walks of life and those with diverse viewpoints to ensure a robust and supportive participation in the organization as a whole and in DS4E events like this one. All participants in organizational leadership will be held to a code of conduct that creates an environment of respect, inclusion, and effective communication. You can learn more about the community standards, including how to report any violations, on our website. And a member of our team will drop that link in the chat so you can access it easily. I will now pass the floor to Emmanuel without further ado to kick off our conversation here today.
Awesome. Well, hey, thank you so much, Zarek. It's great to be here. I have been around for a while, and I'm unbelievably lucky and privileged to be introducing four incredible advocates today. I've got goosebumps that I get to sit on the same panel with them. So let's start with Lindsey Henderson, who currently serves as the secondary math specialist for the Utah State Board of Education. She is passionate about providing rich learning opportunities for all Utah mathematicians, where learners are engaged in building and maintaining strong mathematical identities, which for anyone who knows her knows that this is a process that she calls mathing. And she's been recognized by the Women Tech Council for her extraordinary commitment to educational leadership. Lindsey began her educational career teaching literally all of the secondary math classes for Salt Lake City School District and some science classes too, and later joined the Salt Lake City educational technology startup ecosystem before returning home to public education as the K-12 math specialist for Davis School District. She lives in Salt Lake City with her wife, kittens, and 2 teens. Paige Prescott is the co-founder and executive director of Computer Science Alliance, where she works to strengthen the community of people involved in CS education. She began her educational career as a middle and high school science teacher, and after 11 years in the classroom, got involved in computer science education with Project GUTS, shout out to Irene Lee, to bring computational modeling to middle school students. Paige is now part of the Science Plus C project over at EDC, and is developing resources for high school science classes to use computational modeling, data science, and computer science skills to deepen their understanding of scientific phenomena. She's provided professional learning and computing for over 2,000 teachers in both New Mexico, where she's based, and nationally. And on top of that, she's pursuing a PhD in learning sciences at UNM, where she's focusing on CS education with a particular interest that's near and dear to my heart, which is integrating computer science into content areas and culturally responsive pedagogy for CS. We are also joined by Eboney McKinney, the Director of Mathematics and Educational Technology for the Arizona Department of Education, Academic Standards Unit. And for those of you that are keeping track, I believe this counts as 3 of the 4 corners are represented here today, which is awesome. Before working for the state, Eboney spent 11 years working in Southern Arizona in the Sierra Vista Public School District as a student achievement teacher, a teacher leader, and an educational advocate. She's taught 4th grade, 5th grade, and 6th grade. She has presented at the local, state, and national level on math content and teacher leadership. Ebony earned her BA in elementary education from Prescott College in Arizona, and her MA in math teaching and a certificate in professional development and coaching from Mount Holyoke College in Massachusetts. She's currently pursuing a PhD in organizational development and leadership through the University of Arizona. Kevin Dykema is president of the National Council of Teachers of Mathematics, that is NCTM, for those in the know. It's an international math organization with more than 30,000 members. He's taught 8th grade mathematics for over 25 years and is currently at the Matterhorn Middle School in Southwest Michigan. Kevin is a frequent speaker before mathematics education audiences. I've been to a number of his talks and he's awesome. And has co-authored Productive Math Struggle, published by Corwin. He's also written a number of articles for mathematics teacher learning and teaching PK-12. I recommend you look them up. And Kevin loves working with others to help improve educational mathematics education for each and every student. So these folks are an absolute delight. We're insanely lucky to be here with all of them. And we're going to kick off our conversation first by just allowing each panelist to do like a short presentation on their work and specifically how it connects to implementing data science at the state, or in Kevin's case, sort of national math level. And we're going to go in, let's see, alphabetical order by last name. So Kevin, I believe that means we're going to kick it off with you. And then we're going to move to Lindsey, Ebony, and Paige. So I'll mute myself. Kevin, take us away.
Thank you, Emmanuel, and thank you for the invitation to join this panel, and very honored and very excited to be here with such other great panelists. I unfortunately am not from the Four Corners, so I'm the oddball. The other three are all there. I have been to Colorado, and my wife was just there last week visiting, so I should have gone to Colorado. So if I would have remembered that, I could have done it from Colorado and could have had all four corners there. But why am I interested in data science, and where do I see it from a national perspective? I look at data science as a rapidly growing area. 3 years ago, 4 years ago, there was some movement around data science, however you want to say it. But within the last 6 months, I feel like it's starting to explode. And more people are having rich, deep conversations about what should it look like? Who should be teaching it? Where should it be housed? And those are all questions of interest on a national level as the NCTM president. You know, how does it tie into mathematics? What math needs to be in a data science course at the high school level in order for it to count as a math class? Does it replace Algebra 2? Does it come after Algebra 2? I have more questions than I probably have solid answers to, but I think it's important that we have these conversations and we talk with other people who are implementing things and starting to implement and having those rich, deep things. Last week, somebody shared an article with me from the Los Angeles Times, and in there they talked about UC Berkeley. And UC Berkeley is making history for the first time in the last 50 years. They're starting a new college. And the new college they're starting is called the College of Computing, Data Science, and Society. And as they look at data science there, they've noted that in the last 3 years, the number of majors has doubled. It is now at 1,232. Additionally, another 3,000 people took their introduction to data science course. And I think it just shows it's rapidly growing at the higher ed level. It's rapidly growing at the K-12 level. And we need to be having these good conversations as we're going to have today about what exactly is data science? Who should be teaching it? How do we get it started? What are some of those big key implementation things? And again, I'm very honored to be here. I hope to be able to contribute some ideas. I don't have all the answers. I don't think anybody has all the answers because it is still in its relative infancy stages. But I think it's so important that we continue to have all of these wonderful conversations and to keep pushing each other forward and to learn from each other. And with that, I'm going to pass it back over to Emmanuel.
And I'm just going to go and pass that right over to Lindsey.
Oh, I'm so glad I didn't have to alphabetize the last names. Thanks, Emmanuel. Thanks, Kevin, for doing that. Lindsey Henderson. I am the secondary math specialist at the Utah State Board of Education, and I am really proud to represent an experiment that we tried in our state, and we're not tried past tense, but we are trying in the present tense to implement, to give kids data science experiences in high school through a capstone course for a junior or senior in our high school setting. our stakeholders have been overwhelming, just positive response to data is the new literacy of 2023. All students need to be engaged with data, need to know how to ask questions about data, need to know how to come to mathematical conclusions with data. And I say that I hear this from parents, I hear it from teachers, I hear it from students, I hear it from our thriving tech community, that students need to be engaged with data in ways that make sense and give them skills to be an engaged citizen. So I'm really excited to be here and to talk about our trial we have a data science pilot course, like I mentioned earlier, and I'm really excited to talk about what we've learned and what we've discovered on our journey. And I will pass it to, and now I have to alphabetize, is Ebony. Yay!
Thanks, Lindsay. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Eboney McKinney. I'm the Director of Math and Ed Tech at the Arizona Department of Ed, and we are truly in the infancy stage of this work. So I am honored and terrified at the same time to be part of this panel, but I am happy to share how we're getting started and where we're headed. And so for us, the conversation around data science as a state started as how do we create more equitable high school math pathways? What is a better option for our students? Our data is not great, like most folks around the US. And so thinking about what we could do differently for our students. And so our initial thought was, well, we'll build out standards for a high school course, and that'll be that. And then as we started to continue having conversations with different organizations, we realized very quickly that this was not something that could just live in the high school space. And so as a state, we put together a convening in March of this year. So again, very, very early stages. And we had folks in the room from science, social studies, high school, elementary, middle school. Emmanuel presented. We had other friends from different Department of Eds. We are really just looking to have conversations, see what folks were interested in, what was already happening. Arizona is a local control state, which we like to refer to as the Wild West, and folks are just kind of doing whatever they want to do. And so we wanted to kind of bring all of that energy together and really think about how do we systemically define data science, particularly in the K-12 space, to then better connect it to our post-secondary colleagues as they are doing this work. And so, like I said, we are very early on in this process. We're actually bringing a small group together tomorrow to just kind of go through all of the information that was collected in March. And so we are just excited about this work and what it will mean for kids moving forward. But we absolutely know that the conversation is K-12 with partnerships in post-secondary. It won't just live in high school mathematics. Paige?
Thanks, everyone. Paige Prescott. I'm based in Santa Fe, New Mexico, and with Computer Science Alliance, I focus on teacher professional development and expanding computer science education through the teachers that are basically our biggest levers of change. And so I'm connected to that experience that teachers have, and specifically thinking about science and integration. And then data science now is like the new literacy, as Lindsay pointed out, and that these conversations that Kevin mentioned are so important to have at such a beginning stage. So in New Mexico, we're not even at the baby stage, we're at the embryonic stage where we're starting to really have this, starting to think about it and what it's going to do for things like course codes and teacher professional development in general, and how high schools and K-12 experiences might have to be restructured to accommodate for these new literacies specific to data science or computer science. And so for me, I see that teachers, although we can say it's great to integrate and we can give them a few resources and activities, that teachers actually need a lot more help with that integration. There's a lot more support that's needed. And, that's what I'm hoping that our conversation today could point to, things that are working, because this community has lots of ideas that we can start to share and really learn from each other in these very beginning stages. But I do know that industry is really keen on more data science and having graduates be able to deal with data at small and large levels, and that the big emphasis in New Mexico anyway is taking professionals and getting them trained in data science. And so if we could start that earlier, I think that it'll be beneficial to not just our workforce, but then for our society in general, because data literacy is so important these days. So thanks, and looking forward to the conversation.
Thank you, Paige. Thanks to everybody. So, we're going to kick off the Q&A part of this, and I've got a couple of questions that are sort of pre-baked, but then we're going to open it up. And by the way, for those of you that are watching at home, if you've got a question, you don't need to wait. You can put it in the chat. We're monitoring that chat, and we're going to be sort of compiling a live list of questions to throw at these amazing speakers in real time. So I want to start off with a really basic question, which is, what is data science? Because everyone is sort of either like rah data science or boo data science, but there's not a lot of clarity on what the heck data science actually is. And so I'm going to start with Kevin, since he's the odd man out here and not being a state rep, and he's going to give us sort of the math perspective. But my challenge to Kevin and to the rest of the panelists who want to chime in on this one is, my challenge to you is, don't just tell us what data science is. It would be helpful to get a counterexample of what data science ain't. So take a moment to think about that as poor Kevin is on the hot seat here. So I'll pass it off to Kevin.
Well, I'm going to start with what it's not, because I think in many respects, it's easier to define it in terms of what it's not. It is not statistics 2.0. And I think many people initially, they hear the data science and think, oh, it's a new name to get statistical literacy into the classrooms. It's not. I would say statistics is part of it. So what do I think data science is? And, Emmanuel said it's a basic question. It may be a basic question, but I think it's fundamental to how you structure the data science within your school district, within your state, within your building, within your whatever. So sort of my, it's not a perfect definition by any stretch of the imagination. I think data science is examining how data is generated, collected, organized, and analyzed, utilizing some paper pencil tools, but really utilizing the power of technology. Incorporated with all of that has to be the ethics behind all of that. And what are the ethical and the unethical uses of that? And if we're focusing just on that data collection and organization and analyzing it, we're missing a big key part. And that ethics has to be part of it, and looking at what are the just uses of it and what are the unjust uses of it. So that's sort of my working definition. It has to be integrated. It is not just a mathematics thing. It's math along with that content knowledge, along with computer science and coding. And it's got so much involved with it, which makes it one of the challenging things to figure out how to implement it, especially when we look at a high school, that many high schools tend to be siloed by content areas, as opposed to the elementary, where if I'm a fourth grade teacher, I teach everything in fourth grade.
Awesome. Thanks, Kevin. So yeah, I'm curious if there are panelists that want to dive in, or if you're happy with Kevin's answer.
Well, I would like to add a little bit about computer science. Not that I work with computer science education, but I'm not a computer scientist myself. However, the standards do point to thinking about data broadly. And like Kevin said, all sorts of tools that are used with that. And I would say that there's some very basic code that can be used to analyze and to look at data, to visualize it in manners that are engaging and things like that. There's a lot of resources out there that that present the visualizations, but the computer science would allow students to get in and to actually code those visualizations. And you can do a lot also with Excel spreadsheets and kind of starting to use lots of different functions within that, but that there is a strong overlap with computer science.
All right, we've got our two answers for our definitions. I wanted to make sure there was space for folks to dive in who may have wanted to. So Lindsey, this one's going to go to you. Everyone talks about, well, data science, like every subject has data. So maybe data science could just be in everything. And I see you nodding, which is great. In that case, I'm going to challenge you further to say, are there places where it might be a tighter fit, a more snug fit than others? So what's Lindsey Henderson's ranking of where this stuff might fit?
Well, you just described my perfect world. It's data and data analytics living in every content area and being infused just in school in general. Unfortunately, the way we silo things and graduation requirements and things like that have forced us to kind of make a decision as to where data science lives. And our stakeholders have been overwhelming in saying that it lives in mathematics. The data science is a mathematics course, that it should earn mathematics credit, and that it should be given as an option for a student to engage with somewhere in high school. And our stakeholders are also very supportive of the idea that like pre-K or kindergarten, you're building some sort of data literacy skills or data sense making skills. And then there's some point where you build that muscle all the way through middle school, upper elementary, middle school, all the way into high school. And then there's an inflection point where that switches suddenly into data science, which in Utah, we think involves some sort of programming language, some sort of data visualization piece, but always the students are the one, it's very student-centered, right? The students are asking questions about data. They're looking at data. They're trying to come to conclusions using the math as the tool, the vehicle to get them to those conclusions, to share them. In Utah, I feel really honored because for the last 10 years, we have had integrated math standards in high school. And that was based on the premise that math is a complex web of ideas. It is not a linear trajectory to mathematical enlightenment. We always like to say there are many paths to mathematical enlightenment. And so the question is when should students be given agency to choose what mathematics fits their interests and their future aspirations the best? And in Utah, we're still having those conversations, and it's messy work, and there are lots of opinions, and there's lots of conversation about it going on. But we're thinking somewhere it's in the junior or senior year that students should have choice to decide which path they want to experience. And it's not, our stakeholders are very much, they're like, we don't want to turn anybody off from the calculus or the statistics pathway by offering data science. We just want to capitalize on student interest, on families' wishes for a student's future. And we think we need to do that with choices. And it's not a question of if it's not calculus, statistics, or data science. Is it calculus in high school or calculus in your first year of college? I don't know. That's a personal decision we've decided in Utah, left up to the students.
I'll just add that in many places, it's a high school class, but it should not be strictly a high school class. It really needs to be a PK to 12 and beyond endeavor. Here we're talking the K-12 type of world. It needs to happen everywhere. And we need to find those places to really infuse that and not just at the high school level, maybe starting out that high school level. But there's really so much data, and our youngest students have that capacity, have the ability to start to make sense of the world about them. And we need to continue to have people make sense of the world around them in order to be successful later on and to be able to be contributors to future society.
Yeah, I think for us in Arizona, we started the conversation with the idea that it was going to just live in high school mathematics. And I think as the conversations moved throughout the day, we very quickly realized, right, like Kevin said, it has to be something that is taught PK-12. It just, yes, it's easy to build out high school standards for, at least for us here in Arizona, and drop it in that high school space. But that's a lot more work when we think about implementing it into K-12 standards that are already built and being implemented, some better than others, right? But what does that look like? What else are we putting on our teachers? But I think collectively, we knew that it could not just live in high school. And like Kevin said, it really is something that has to be considered for our students K-12 and beyond.
Ebony, I think I want to direct this next question to you, because your answer was a great segue to this. As we're thinking about data science and how it might be integrated across grade levels, vertically, and horizontally across subject areas, it's easy to talk about the opportunities of data science, but often people don't talk about the risks. And I'm curious, for you, what do you see as like the greatest opportunities for your students in Arizona? But also, could you speak to some of the risks of doing this?
I think for us in Arizona, the biggest risk in offering data science is that it won't be offered equitably. We just don't have, Arizona geographically is extremely large, and some of our more rural communities won't have the opportunity that some of our other students will because they are just so far away. I mean, we're like most places, we're struggling, to have qualified math teachers in some of those spaces. So this idea of adding something else as an option, in the sense of, equitable opportunity and access for students. And so, and then the other risk is this idea that it's not going to be taught well. What do we have to do to set teachers up for success? I think Paige spoke to that really well. This is a tall ask. It is very new. And so when we think about the teachers that are currently in the classrooms, this is not something that they have experience with. And I'm speaking particularly about our elementary counterparts. And so this idea of adding something else to that plate and asking them to essentially build knowledgeable consumers of information. We live in an age where we are constantly getting information. And so how do you teach kids of all ages to really make sense of what they're seeing and hearing in a way that they can make decisions? And so, Arizona is politically a kind of spicy spot. And so we also have to be really mindful of the political aspects. I mean, it's education. We all know that it is tied to politics as much as we wish that it wasn't. And so what does that then look like, right? We had some legislation in the previous session that was trying to change, high school math requirements. And so we have to be really, really mindful of the messaging around data science and what does that entail, so that communities understand the value of it for their students, but also their community. What is it going to bring to the state as a whole? And so I think for us, we have to be really, really mindful of how are we going to message what it is, what it isn't, and what does it look like across that continuum. And I think because, Arizona is Arizona, right? That's going to be something that we're really going to have to be thoughtful about. Opportunity-wise, I think everyone has already spoken to it. It's a beautiful opportunity for kids to really engage in the world in a way that makes sense to them. And so we're excited about providing this opportunity for students to engage in the world in a different way.
Can I add on to that I think one of the risks of not providing a K-12 data science experience is you're not giving kids a tool that they could use to be an engaged citizen in their world. If you completely shove it to the side and ignore it, I mean, that's your choice. And I think it does a huge disservice to students and to the future of the world, really.
And I would just briefly add another opportunity. Data science cannot be the math for dummies. It cannot be perceived as those who are incapable of doing calculus. Let's put you in a data science course. Data science is at that same level as calculus. And I worry that there's going to be a perception out there that those that can't take this class, and it should not be perceived as the class for those that can't.
I get asked a lot, who is this data science course for? What student would be the most successful? And I always say, if the student's interested in taking data science, if it serves their future, then that is the right student for this course. And it doesn't keep them in a data science pathway or track. We're trying to make things very interoperable. So we're hoping that the data science experience actually reignites a love of mathematics, because we've all been the teacher of that course where the kids have taken, they haven't seen themselves as being accepted in a mathematical space, and suddenly they're a junior in high school and you have to teach them algebra 2, which is so engaging, all those polynomials and all that fun content, which I love as a mathematician. But this data science opportunity just seems to reignite, like the pandemic is really, our teachers feel the need to capitalize on student interest. Math is like the last subject that needs to, get on the student interest train. And I feel like data science can really help that.
Awesome. Thank you, Pat. So Paige, I want to shift this next question to you. You mentioned that you're at the embryonic or perhaps even zygote stage of rolling this out. And actually, I think it's really cool that we have 3 panelists from different states that are actually on each on a distinct level of implementation. So I'm gonna direct this question to Paige, but I feel like it would be great to hear next from Ebony and then finally from Lindsey about this as we look at maturity, right? So in New Mexico, where you're just at the very, very beginning, what are the challenges that are foremost on your mind when you think about implementing data science statewide?
Yeah, thank you. This is an important question. So what we have done is we have seeded our some of this data science knowledge through professional development workshops, a lot of Bootstrap resources that we've engaged our teachers with through professional development workshops. However, you know, that concentrated time tools and thinking about data science is fantastic. However, it stagnates and maybe even shrivels because they're not implementing. And so that would be the next one. So we might understand the teacher professional development world, but then what's the implementation world going to feel like? And that's where we need to engage administrators and sort of a lot of the vertical communication to allow that flexibility for teachers to start to bring that relevance of data science into their classrooms. And when we run a data science workshop, we want any kind of teacher to join that because we, you know, at this very early stage, we want to cast a wide net and then see what the successes and struggles are. And so then we're seeing that implementation and lack of administrator support is becoming an area of a barrier for our teachers that are interested in trying, but yet are hemmed in. And then, you know, it's fabulous and needed to have policy and to have the state education agencies that are leading part of the conversation because they have a different leverage than myself that's outside of the state education agency, but is a partner to them. And, you know, so these are the areas that I'm seeing is that teachers need their own support system that is a little bit different. And then we need to engage the administrators that are making some choices that are either preventing teachers from implementing or are, you know, maybe there's some different misconceptions that they might have. So we'll see if Lindsey and Ebony and Kevin have other things to add to that.
So I think Arizona has a couple challenges. First and foremost, our superintendent of public instruction is an elected position. So again, it is tied to politics. And so if it does not align with the current superintendent's priorities, movement in that space won't happen. We are only a few months in and just everyday work is a struggle to get done because of the change in the leadership. So for us, that is probably one of the biggest orders. We also, like I said, being local control, we can build out state standards. But like Paige said, it's implementation because data science will not be a course that is assessed, which unfortunately we have assessment scores tied to school letter grades, like that there's this whole machine of, you know, that politicians have created. And so schools are focused on math and ELA, right? Because they are tested subjects. Science, you know, a couple grades, I think we're at 5th grade and 8th grade. You know, so they do everybody feverishly teaches science, you know, during those years because it's assessed. And so how do we move beyond being focused on just those courses that are assessed? And so and then also resources, right? Teachers are already strapped. They're burnt out. Like, just what else could we, what could we build that would allow them to come and engage in a way that's meaningful. We have a great partner at the University of Arizona, and they have a data science academy that they offer in the summer. And so they're doing fabulous work with cohorts of teachers. And so that's still kind of up and running, and they're in Southern Arizona. And so they're reaching that particular group of teachers. But when we think about on a larger statewide scale, that implementation model is a struggle because we are small teams. And because we are only able to recommend, right, and build out standards, we don't dictate curriculum. Once we build out those standards, we put them out, the rest is up to them. And so we have no way of really knowing if it's done well and kids are actually engaging in that. Privacy issues allow us, limit the amount of data that's collected. And so those are some of probably the biggest challenges for us as a state, as we think about how do we do this in a way that is going to get to kids so that they can then engage in meaningful learning that they're interested in.
To piggyback off of what both Paige and Ebony shared, in Utah, the biggest challenge, now that I'm looking back at it, we just finished up the first year of the 2-year data science pilot. And what I thought would be the biggest challenges turned out to not be the biggest challenges. And biggest challenge was to actually do something. Me as a state leader, making space for teachers to engage in these rich experiences around data so that they could then take it to their classrooms was really important. And it also kind of led by example. If I'm expecting, I think data science sometimes with the programming and the data visualization pieces, those could be intimidating for teachers. And so by me taking a risk as a leader and allowing space for them to try things and to experiment and to see what works and what vibes with them is really important. So I would say that was probably the biggest challenge, is figuring out what I wanted to do, first of all. And then also, what I thought would be a big challenge would be our higher ed partners and getting them on board with some sort of pathway into our dual enrollment. We call it concurrent here in Utah. They were ecstatic when they learned about the data science pilot. They were like, how do we get agreements in place so that kids can have a pathway into our 1040 class, which is statistics, introductory statistics. And it was so amazing that by starting the conversation, by starting the project, all the teachers who were interested in it, these are really the innovative leaders of our state in the data science space. And then it also gave power to our higher ed community to be like, oh, here's this thing going on. We need to get on this data science train and find a way that it fits into our mathematics, into our higher ed space. Another challenge that I didn't exactly anticipate, but it was easy to rectify, was people are highly concerned in Utah about indoctrination, and for good reason. Nobody likes to be indoctrinated or be fed somebody else's beliefs. And so we're very much talking about, we're empowering students in this data science course to look at data, to ask their own questions about data. Nobody's feeding them questions to ask, and then to come to their own conclusions. They have complete ownership over the whole process. And then they are going to communicate the results that they find. And so by empowering students in that way, in a very student-centered way, takes the fears away from the indoctrination that sometimes people have a concern with.
So, as I'm listening to the discussion here, and I'm also reading some of the stuff that's going on in chat, I feel like we're at a really interesting fork in the road based on what I've just heard from all three of you. And so one fork is sort of the math fork, right? So, as a state, how are you thinking about it? What are the challenges in using data science in math? And often, as folks have alluded to, it's often being pitched as an alternative or perhaps a replacement for the traditional third-year course. And then the other fork in the road is like, well, how does this fit everywhere, right? How does, as a state, how do we think about this more broadly? And so I want to take both paths, and I literally flipped a coin a moment ago just to sort of get a sense for which question we would start with first. So, Kevin, since you were left out of this, what should states be thinking about question? I'm going to start this one with you. You're the president of NCTM here, and multiple folks in the chat have sort of asked, and this came up from Mark Schomer and Veronica Blackham added on to this, saying, well, gosh, for the states that are looking at data science as an alternative or replacement for third-year math, which is typically Algebra 2, there's some variation though. Mark points out the standards don't really align. And Veronica asks, well, gosh, what is the math that absolutely had better be part of a data science class if it's gonna count for high school third-year math credit? And I'm wondering if you can speak to that.
Absolutely. And I think that's the right question to be asking and the right question to be figuring out. And I would push back a little bit of why does it have to replace the third year of math? Why can't it be that fourth year of math that I think so often we're thinking of it as a replacement of Algebra 2 or an integrated Math 3? Why does it have to be the replacement for that? Why aren't we saying that there's enough important math everywhere, but this should be a fourth year of math at that point in time? So I think we limit ourselves when we say it's that third year of math, so I push with that. But I think, look at those big key ideas and when we think about, here when we talk about Algebra 2 as that third year, or integrated Math 3 if you're in Utah and other states that are using that integrated math approach. But much of that stuff that's taught in there is looking at different ways of change. We're moving past linear relationships and really hitting exponentials and logarithmics and quadratic. There is a ton of data that you can use to represent all of those things. So find ways. Data science doesn't have to be this brand new thing. Take what you would normally do in Algebra 2 and normally do in Integrated 3 and infuse it with data. Give them some real life stuff that can be best modeled with an exponential relationship. Give them a relationship that's best modeled with a logarithm. Give them a relationship that may be best modeled with a trig function, and start to help them see, oh, this is why we're doing it. We're not just doing this math just for the sake of learning some weird random things, or what appears to the students to be weird and random. But there's a purpose behind it. There's a reason that somebody at one point in time introduced this new function. And I would think, this question of what math needs to be in there, this is really the burning question that so many high schools are starting to wrestle with, and so many states are wrestling with. So it's definitely the right question to ask. And I don't have all the answers to that yet. And I'm still in a learning stage and meeting with people fairly consistently to get other people's ideas of what needs to be in that in order for it to count as a math course.
So Kevin, I think you've just given us some really good concrete guidance here, like from that sort of NCTM's idea or Kevin's personal ideas. And I want to try to restate them and make sure that I'm getting you right word for word, because I feel like so often people are looking for like I want to just hear like the crispest summary. So I think I hear you saying, it shouldn't have to just be a replacement for the third year class, but if it's going to be, it had better include nonlinear relationships like quadratics, exponentials, logarithms, and so on. But am I hearing you right there?
Absolutely. You stated it much more beautifully than I would have done that. So thank you for making me look fairly decent for a brief moment.
Well, I get to be the observer, right? So it's the privilege of the fool is to listen to what's said in court. Before I shift to the other question about infusing data science in more subjects, I'm wondering if there are any other folks on the panel that want to speak to some of this. If data science is going to be a math credit, what must it have to count?
I don't have an answer to that question, but what I will say is we are looking at Algebra 2 and saying, having conversations with our post-secondary partners to say, what in Algebra 2 must every kid have access to, right? What are the things that we still have in Algebra 2 that kids don't need? I mean, in a recent conversation, there was a couple of standards that was like our post-secondary folks were like, we don't even teach that anymore. Why are you teaching this in high school? And so it's like, what this question brings up is the need for more conversations across K-12 and post-secondary to make sure what we have in courses in the high school space are actually relevant and meaningful to guide kids to post-secondary. And so we're realizing, we have a little bit of work to do. And so our guiding question for us as we look at Algebra 2, and then as we continue to look at potentially building out data science standards, what is math that every kid should have access to? What is the math that some kids need access to, right? And then what is the math that no kids need access to because it is no longer relevant? And so we're using those three questions as we think through, stats and data science. People are like, what's the difference? So the same thing. How do we know what's what? And what is important and valuable to move kids thinking and learning forward?
I'm going to put one more plug in for Utah's wonderful idea for a non-linear path to mathematical enlightenment, and how heterogeneous groups of students who have different mathematical experiences bring a lot of strengths to a community and to a family. And we're also, like Ebony described, the work they're doing in Arizona, we're engaged in the same work in Utah, and we're trying to decide what is the math that helps students realize engaged citizenship, math for everybody, and then what is the math that students should maybe specialize in because they're interested in it, or they want to pursue something, they want to pursue a career that requires that style of mathematics, that part of the mathematical web.
Awesome. Thanks, panelists. Okay, so now we're going to shift to the other fork. And Paige, I'm going to start with you since you're approaching this specifically from an integrated lens for both computing and data science. And just to try to kill a couple of birds with a single stone, I want to point out that this question about integration across subject areas really touches on a number of questions that have been raised in the chat. So Mahmoud talked about, how do you prepare teachers to think about data science in their subjects? Victor was talking about how can practitioners integrate project-based transdisciplinary approaches into their data science offerings? And more recently, Wesley Hamilton talks about the role of modeling. So like a lot of folks are getting at this issue of like, do you have a checklist? Do you have a playbook for how data science can be integrated into these different subjects and how teachers can prepare themselves to do it?
No, there's no silver bullet on this. And it is a little bit messy right now. And I think that's okay. As long as we can kind of harness the champions that are doing it in the classroom and figuring it out. Some of it is through like competition level stuff, maybe it's through science fair to start getting them to really dig in a small scale, but then give the teachers the experience of what it feels like to work with kids that are trying to work with data science, and then let them bring that into the classroom. So I feel like out of school time or some like summer experiences really can help de-escalate the fear that teachers might have. And so if we could build that into our models at a state level, and let that experimentation for the teacher side, let them gain confidence, I think that we're going to, it might feel slow, and it might feel like there's inadequate access to that for the initial parts of it, but let's let teachers gain that confidence and that positive experience so that they can bring it to their classroom. And that's what we saw with computational modeling. It started in after school, and it slowly has been more and more emphasized in the science classroom. And so I really feel like there's something that to give the teachers the experience that they need. And then there needs to be concrete examples of how to do it at different grade levels that meet the standards that teachers feel beholden to. So it has to be really concrete. You can't just say it can do it and run a professional development that is general and expect an integration to happen. You really have to make it much more targeted. So maybe you start with a general like experience around data science education, but then hone in on the middle school science teacher, which has a different experience than a middle school math teacher versus a social studies, and give them the space to develop their expertise and that community. And then also that's different at the high school level and the K-5. So you're not going to have just one single experience that's going to lead to success. And so try for lots of different models that could be out there.
So the only thing I would add to that, at least for Arizona, we include teachers in the standards writing process, right? They are our biggest stakeholder group, along with organizations, like Bootstraps and the statistical science, our post-secondary partners, at the different universities. And so just really being mindful of having the right combination of folks in the room to build this out, because they will be the implementers of that. And then just also thinking about, a professional learning plan. Paige spoke to the need for differentiation as they bring their different level of and content area expertise, but also thinking about the continued support, right? Nothing is ever great when it's one and done. Teachers need that continued support. And so thinking about financially, where does that come, what does that look like? You know, where is the time coming from? You know, what conversations are being had at the leadership level of school districts and states to really think about if this is going to be done well, you know, what resources can they provide to ensure that this work is done in a meaningful way for both teachers and students?
And I would add part of that teacher support, part of that teacher preparation, teacher training has to be how, as a math teacher, in this case, how as a math teacher do I have conversations about ethics? That's so out of the realm of what my preparation from 4 years plus 20 some years of teaching, that's not, I've never had to have a real great ethical conversation. How do I structure that just in general, but especially given in this current political climate where society wants education to fix all of its ills, but don't you dare talk about this, or this, and that list seems to keep growing. So I think part of that support has to be, part of that training has to be, you know, where do you fit in data science and stuff, but part of it's how do you have good ethical conversations and what are those ethical dilemmas? Because for those in the math world, that's not our background. We didn't grow up thinking about those things and we weren't prepared to be thinking about those things, let alone have those conversations with a bunch of adolescents.
Awesome. Thank you guys for the lively discussion. This was a great set of answers. I want to highlight one question that was raised in the chat and use that as a segue to the final question of tonight. And this is where I'm going to use my moderator powers to insert one tiny answer myself here. So let's see, who was it? It was Vanita Lobo says, where can teachers find data that needs models that are exponential, logarithmic, trigonometric, and so on, so they can actually meet the needs of the third year, you know, the mythical third year course that still satisfies all the nonlinear requirements that Kevin talked about, but uses data. So let me just say this. For any corporations that are on the call or are watching this video in the future that are interested in donating data sets, because I know that there's a lot of folks out there that are like, well, hell, I've got a bunch of data. Let me just give that away. And like, that's a press release right there. There is such a difference between quality data sets that were designed for pedagogical purposes, then like that's very different from just lots of data sets. And the truth is, we don't need lots of data sets. We already have them. More is nice, but like we're way past diminishing returns. In fact, it's a logarithmic relationship. There you go, Kevin. What we need is essentially some sort of nutrition label for data sets, so that when a teacher goes on the web and looks at the shelf and says, ooh, what's this data set? They can see right on the label where it came from, who funded the collection and sourcing of this data set. Is this data set appropriate for you for discussing linear relationships, quadratic relationships, and so on? Is this data set going to be maintained? Who's in charge of maintaining it? And to that end, I urge everyone who's thinking about donating data sets to go to the Data Science for Everyone website. Maybe Zarek can paste a link. We've actually created a spec partnering with Bootstrap, Data Science, and Code.org on what this data sheet for data set specification looks like. So if you want to get involved, that is something teachers absolutely need, as Vanita points out. All right, end of soapbox. That being said, what else do teachers need? So this question goes out to the whole panel, which is for teachers who are like, yeah, I've drunk the Kool-Aid, I want to do this. Aside from access to good data sets with nutrition labels, what else do teachers need to be successful at this?
I have some very strong opinions on this. Oh, go ahead, Paige. You go ahead.
Mine's short. They just need a community that they can kind of experiment with and share. And it could be small. It could be a site colleague, or it could be somebody across the state or across the country, but just somebody else that they can share their struggles and successes with.
Stole the words right out of my mouth, Paige. Exactly. We need to make space as leaders for teachers to try new things and to fail and recover and get up and find what works, right? And I also think that in Utah, we relied, for our mathematics endorsement, we relied heavily on the MET2 from the Conference Board of Mathematical Sciences. I think MET stands for Mathematical Education of Teachers, and that defined our requirements. And I think it's time for an update. I'm if anybody from the Conference Board of Mathematical Sciences is listening, I would love a MET3 or a SET, maybe a MSET3 would be amazing.
I would add educators need some good concrete examples, some good curricula to use. That if we're going to expect that teachers are just going to come up with this on their own, it's not going to happen to any type of equality, no matter what grade level we're working on. When I think of my elementary friends, they're already stretched so incredibly thin because they're teaching everything all day long. When I think of my middle and high school friends, we have that same, I mean, just because you may teach one class all day long, you're still, it's 150 students that you're seeing and 150 different personalities you're managing. So there is no age band in education where teachers are just sitting back saying, I have all this time in the world to create something from scratch. And if they are, please email me, because I need to get a different job then when I go back into the classroom in a couple of years. I want to come to your place if you're just able to sit and say, let me give all this time to think about what I want to do.
I would agree with everything that everyone has just said. I think also someone in the chat just mentioned this, the need to start these conversations at the pre-service level. I mean, teachers just need to know that they will be supported, right, in moving this work forward. So being able to have conversations, whether it's, site-based leaders or school district leaders, like, why is this important? Why do we need to bring this? And so I think also providing them a way to advocate for themselves and their students at a local level is something that would be helpful.
All right, well, I believe that is the end of our time here for Q&A. And before Zarek comes at me with the hook, I'm just going to gently hand him the mic and say,
Thank you so much, Emmanuel. And thank you all. That was just an amazing conversation. I think, huge thank you to our panelists for giving just really actual takeaways and, more importantly, being vulnerable, right, about the things we don't know yet. And I think that was such a powerful reminder for the stage that we're in and where the field is at today. I think we covered a lot on tactics. We covered a lot of realities of different pathways and integration design choices that data science can take shape in K-12. And we know there's a lot more work to do, right? Cross implementation, capacity building, and policy, and making sure that whether you work in implementation or teacher training or policy, everyone's talking to each other, which I think made this conversation today so good because we had all those different perspectives represented, sharing insights there. So thank you again. That was amazing. My charge to the audience is next steps. We want to keep the conversation going with other members of the panel here and also the Data Science for Everyone community. There are so many ways to get in touch. Our Slack, newsletter, LinkedIn, Twitter, lots of different social channels. We also would give a huge shout out for you all to follow our panelists as well through Bootstrap, NCTM, Computer Science Alliance, or the state of Utah and Arizona to get in touch with those partners and follow their sites and socials. If you requested a certificate of completion for this event, one will be emailed to you in the coming days. And if you are planning for next year and want to get inspired this summer by today's conversation, a gentle reminder and plug to check out our resource center on the DS3 website. It's growing fast with coverage across more subject areas and grade levels that we're trying to add every month. So please make sure to check back often, and we'll make sure that all the resources the panelists mentioned today are listed on that site if it's not already. We are also planning, as we wrap up for the end of the school year, we're also very excited to soon announce winning entries for the Data Science Collaboration Challenge, which was a lesson plan collaboration opportunity between teachers across different school subjects to find novel and creative ways to bring data science and data literacy learning to their classrooms. We're really excited to see the community engaging there. Please be on the lookout for that resource. Finally, we're always happy to connect, so please don't hesitate to reach out. We hope you all have a great rest of your day, and we hope to see you at a future event. Best of luck as the school year wraps up, and we'll give you exactly 1 minute back, finishing the event perfectly on time today. Great job, team.